Hey guys, what's going on? It's good to see you. I have Tim Imholt over here with me. Tim, thank you for coming along on this crazy ride today.
Oh, thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, of course, I needed an actual smart person on this video, so I invited you. This is something that I talk about occasionally on the live streams, and I never really give a lot of dedication to. Usually because I'm talking about a mile a minute about 100 other things and getting questions in the live stream, and or we have a guest that we're about to bring on, or a game that we're about to play, or a deep dive we're about to do. But I want to kind of laser focus on this today because this is something that Tim brought this up the other day, and I just started doing some back of the envelope numbers crunching to figure this out. And that is, have tabletop RPGs, well, let me back up from that. Has Dungeons and Dragons gotten more expensive, ergo harder to afford as the years have gone on? And so I sat down. Again, this is all back of the envelope stuff, but I'm going to link to the calculators I used, and I'll put the prices and everything down in the description, and anything that Tim wants to add, we'll put in there too. But this basically, if we go to advanced Dungeons and Dragons, when D&D really kind of took that step up towards broad retail out of hobby shops and war game stores, to a broader retail market. We look at first edition AD&D, and that's not partisanship on my part. It's just the way it was, because at that
Where it all
point,
began, right?
yeah, you could, at that point, you're buying D&D in B. Daltons and KB Toys and so forth and so on.
Local hobby shops, right? I mean,
instead of, I got to go to a store that sells trains and Napoleonics war games to get D&D. It's showing up on movies and so on at this point. So I used 1979, and that's when the Dungeon Master's Guide was finally released. I used that as my bellwether, and the prices that I could find for AD&D books. So back in 1979, a monster manual would set you back $9.99 American. And for our viewers around the world, yes, all these prices are in US dollars for 1979. And now you would have to do the rough conversions and plug them in. Maybe it's different for you, but broadly, I'm talking to our US audience here. So $9.99 for the monster manual. And again, one more caveat: maybe you paid more, maybe you paid less. A player's handbook was $15, $14.99, and the Dungeon Master's Guide, I remember this well, I bought mine at TG&Y, was $15. So if we plug those numbers into the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, what we come up with is $45.68, $59.63, which tells me that I gave you guys the wrong number. The player's handbook was $12.99, and $68.86 for the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that brings us to a total of $174.17. That was a chunk of change back in 1979. That was about $25 more a week than my dad was bringing home from his job at the steel plant. Now, again, going by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median income back then was $16,530 per household. So if you put the $37 that the three books would have cost you through and do a little basic math, we come up with 0.22%, or about 1/5 of your household income would have to be spent on AD&D. I'm not talking.
What was the total? What was the total of the three put together?
The total back then was $37.
Right,
The
but if you
total,
adjust it for today,
if you adjust it for today, is $174.17 adjusted for today's money.
so one thing to add to this, and this is, I think, important. I'm looking on Amazon in the other window here. The Dungeons and Dragons Core Rulebook gift set with special foil cover edition and slipcase and Dungeon Master screen to include the monster manual, the DM, and the player's handbook, without the discount currently running on Amazon, is $169 retail.
Yeah,
And
so
that's the special edition. With the discount, it's $98.
yeah,
So
it's a little less.
It's
So
within $3.
Right. If we take that median income and plug it into the CPI inflation calculator, the median income in 1979 in the United States, adjusted for inflation, was $75,885 in today's money. So here's the interesting thing that happened now. Tim pulled up the lovely deluxe set, with all the trimmings and toppings that he was talking about. I went through and I just did the books. Now, this is not including the usual Amazon. We're basically going to give these away and make no money just to pin you guys down as our customers, which, by the way, you shouldn't do. You should buy these from your FLGS unless you are completely strapped or you don't have an FLGS. Support your local game stores, guys. But running the total whole retail book price through Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, we come up with $149.85. Now, let's go back to the Bureau of Labor statistics. Median income right now in the United States is $77,345. If you plug those book prices in, and you want to buy just the core AD&D books, again, no modules, no dice, no extra character sheet packs, none of that. Guess what? The price is 0.19% or about 1/5%. Now, again, I am just talking about Dungeons and Dragons. If you come at me and say Games Workshop increases their prices this much every year, look, Games Workshop sucks. I'm not even going to talk about GW.
I feel like you're holding back, Bill. Come on.
But the price of Dungeons and Dragons, amazingly, incredibly, has stayed the same or dropped slightly. Now, Tim, you and I grew up in about the same time. You remember stagflation in the 70s, right? I'm sure you heard that on the news. Maybe your mom and dad were kind of sweating things a little bit.
Oh, yeah, stagflation and then long car lines to even get gas. It was just
yeah. We needed in the 1970s, and even into the early 80s. People talk about the bad economic times under Carter. There was a very real thing called a Reagan recession that hit in 82, 83. But we needed distractions. Things like games and movies, generally speaking, do well. People are actually willing to part with things that distract them from the troubles of day-to-day life. And Dungeons and Dragons, even going back to 74, we're coming out of Watergate. We're on the heels of the end of the war in Vietnam. That is very much something that caught fire, I think, because the cultural zeitgeist wanted a fairy tale.
Well, I think it was a couple of things. One was it's a great way to escape, and I think everybody needed that, right? So even my dad, who I used to bug into being the dungeon master because I didn't know how to do it yet, he kind of, at least some level, enjoyed it because he would actually ask me on occasion, "Hey, you want to play D&D?" He would prefer Avalon Hill War Games, which really Dungeons and Dragons kind of came out of that war game era, right? So it was sort of because war games were very limiting. Dad loved them. But I think he really enjoyed D&D because he loved those war games, and this was just the next logical iteration of them. But the other thing it did was $1 per hour of entertainment. It was incredibly efficient.
Oh, yeah.
I take my kids to a movie now. I got 3 of them. I'm spending $200 by the time I get tickets and food, right? So there's 4 of us. It's $50 a kid by the time I'm done. And can that continue, right? Can that sort of trend continue? In the 70s, you couldn't do it. Gas was too expensive and rare on occasion. So you had to really conserve where you drove to. Like you couldn't really, we might not be able to get gas. Let's save it for going to work. Let's save it for going to the grocery store. So you got to find a way to entertain the kids. And this was a really cost-effective way to do it.
It really was. I mean, there's endless, infinite stories in those 3 hardbacks. And I mean, I don't just do it to be a contrarian. I still play first edition AD&D. It never runs out. Okay. There's never an end credit scene in any version of Dungeons and Dragons. There's never an end credit scene, regardless of what you play. And for a parent or a hobbyist, a young adult, do I want to go see Smokey and the Bandit, which is admittedly a fun 100 minutes, but I see it once and I spent that gas and I paid for that popcorn and that soda and I've spent the gas to go home and I paid for my ticket, possibly for as many as 5 or 6 people one time? Or do we want to do Dungeons and Dragons and literally play forever in infinite varieties? It's more than a board game, right? I mean, you can get hella bored with checkers, chess, Pachisi, Life, Monopoly. D&D is infinite doors leading in infinite directions. So it was a huge value and a great escape when it came out. But
and like you said, even running the same game module, if you didn't forget Homebrew for a second, Homebrew opens up another infinite series of things, right? You could run the basic one that came with was Keep on the Borderlands, right? I've run Keep on the Borderlands a half a dozen different times in my life. It has never come out the same twice. It's always different, just based around who's at the table. How did the dice roll go that day? Is the magic user out of spells? What really is going on? It's every time it's different, and that opens up that back to $1 per hour of entertainment, right? So you've got this infinite set of possibilities for a $10 adventure module.
Yeah, your entertainment delta for Dungeons and Dragons is huge. And I guess kind of the crux of it, and we're going to talk about some other things in a minute. Like I said, Tim is far smarter than me when it comes to financial numbers, but it hasn't gotten more expensive. It really hasn't. And guys, save the vitriol. I'm not defending Hasbro on any front. You guys know I'm not a fan of them or Wizards, but this isn't really about that. This is about money. If you're afraid of that, if you feel like there's a gotcha built into it, and I'm not being cavalier, guys. Trust me when I'm saying I'm not being cavalier. This isn't just a fun set. I'm crammed into a small room. I'm in no giant mansion speaking to you from an ivory tower saying, oh, you peasants should just go spend $150. Don't you have that? I mean, there are cheaper alternatives if you want to play a D&D-like game. There's free D&D games that perfectly mimic the D&D rules.
So part of this came out of a conversation you and I were having, right? Where you see on social media all the time about, oh, that book's too expensive. I can't get that. I'm not buying that. I'm not doing that. Well, okay, yeah, I think a lot of that comes from people that are so Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast just has new edition coming out. And Bill, you play first edition and I love first edition. My kids have zero interest in it, right? So they just don't. They want to play the new stuff. So if I'm playing with my teenagers and their friends, I'm playing 5th just because that's where they want to go. The new edition is going to probably attract a new audience that the old ones didn't. That's why editions happen. But what I see a lot of people doing is they're saying, well, I'm not buying that new edition unless it's the same price as I paid for the other one in 1988. Well, it kind of is, right? It's essentially the same price. Yes, there's a larger dollar figure on it, but it's kind of the same price. And if you look, there's a lot more artistry different artists, different sort of styles, but there's a lot more artistry going into some of these things now. That's probably not a fair assessment because there was some amazing art in the old stuff. But
yeah, I mean,
I think each page has a little more care and feeding into it than some of the original pages did. But it's easier now, right? Because now you have computers to do all that stuff. So I can't really discredit any of the early stuff. It was fantastic. But if you look at, and you tried to market like the original Monster Manual today, because I've seen people come up with that argument too. Oh, they should just re-release the original one. Great, but my 14-year-old is going to look at it like a joke, right? He's not going to touch it. But the newer kids will want to play that newer stuff, even though, yes, I get it's a lot more computerized, it's a lot less personal, but that's because we kind of look at it with nostalgia. So I think part of this also came out of people kind of complaining about the new book prices because they only look at raw dollars. And I think you've done a great job at adjusting those dollars for inflation and showing it hadn't really changed. I mean, yeah, the number on the cover is different, but what that number means is the same thing it meant in 1979.
Just so. And the crux of this, and maybe Tim, you can, what I'm about to say is speculation and opinion, but Tim, if you knock me off this, that's absolutely fine. It's everything else has gotten more expensive.
That's very true.
I'm not going to name actual figures, but the house we live in now, which it's not huge. It's a ranch style house built in the 1970s. That's about as detailed as I want to get about it, is valuated at 4.5 times what we paid for it in 2000.
And that's only since 2000, right?
And that is completely bonkers. Trust me, viewers, Tim, if you guys walked around my house and yard and took a look at this place, you'd be like, ain't no way. Just before we started recording, Tim, we were talking about the price of fast food. To feed yourself at the McDonald's drive-through today, you're going to pay almost $20. Take the family through tonight, close to 100. You go to a better fast food restaurant, maybe, and better is relative. I get it. If I name some of these, a lot of people are going to be like, ew, no, that's garbage tier, but whatever. You take the family to, say, Panera or someplace like that, $125 for 4 people. There's that famous meme of a McDonald's menu from the early 1970s. I've seen it dated as early as 1971 and as late as 1979, but literally every price on their board is measured in cents, not dollars. So
I just put a picture in your Discord, and if you can pull it up, great. If not, I'll just describe it.
I can.
So a couple of days ago, I did a video for my channel that shows house price differences between 1979 and today. And what I did was I adjusted that for inflation, and I took the house price to income, took the median house and the median income, adjusted them all to 2022 dollars, and said, what does it cost to actually live in a house or a home, condo, whatever, today versus 1979. And the income ratio, the house to income, was 2.43 to 1. So you'd spend 2.4 times your annual salary on a home. Today, into what you see on the market is the average. I'm not talking about particular markets. Average across the United States, the average home is 11.3 times the annual the average salary. 11.3.
Yeah.
So if you look at the people talk about cost, well, I don't think it's the cost of the RPGs that have gone nuts. It's the cost of everything else, right? So you've got the home there. That's like 2.4 something, 2.5 something in 1979, whereas now it's 11.3, and it shows no signs of slowing. The only dip we had recently was the 2008 housing debacle.
Right.
And I've got similar charts on things like I was doing one on auto loans. I've done them on, I've got them on 6 or 7 things. And more people live paycheck to paycheck now than they did in the 70s by far. It was sort of 10% of the population. And then now it's like 55 to 60% of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
So while we see a lot of vitriol and a lot of yelling about the RPG space, I think it's important for people to remember, because I love playing them. So it's sort of self-serving for me to say, hey, people, let's just all get along, right? But I think what's going on is people are looking at it relative to available cash. They're not looking at it as available to what the book actually cost versus what it cost then, because it hasn't budged. It's really stayed almost exactly the same. It's just that everything else has skyrocketed to the point of no return.
Yeah.
So we've got this problem in that the money has to come from somewhere. But the way I look at it and the way I justify it for my kids and myself is, what kind of dollar per hour return are you getting on that? And what does it do? So you could put that chart down. But the other thing I look at it as is RPGs. If you look at it from a cost perspective, I look at a lot of things as sort of, what's the return on investment, right? So if I'm going to spend this money, what do I get out of it? Well, I get fun out of it. That's one thing. But if you look at where the economies of the world are going, the only people that are going to maintain stable employment, in my opinion, in the next 15 to 20 years, and I'm a physicist, I've got a weird career, but I work with a lot of startup companies, and I see the inside of what makes a good employee and what doesn't, because, I am, despite the Dungeons and Dragons clothes and weird stuff I do for hobbies, I am the CTO of a growing company. And I've run very large engineering programs, and the engineers I always want to keep around, and the employees, admin employees, it doesn't matter the field. They're always the more creative ones. They're the ones that I don't have to give a list of 15 items to say, go do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? They're the people who can just go figure it out and create a solution from nothing based on a problem they see. Those are the people I want to keep. The ones I don't want to keep are the ones I can replace with automation. Right? And the creative ones are going to stick around. The non-creative ones aren't. And always when I find the creative ones, I find they have hobbies like music, reading, fiction, RPGs, stuff like that, because the brain is a muscle. RPGs have a tendency to exercise that muscle and help you with the creative centers of your brain. Some people say, oh, I'm not creative. Yeah, but have you exercised that part of your brain? And RPGs are an excellent, cost-effective way to do that, right? They really are. And some of the best people at problem solving I've ever come across are actually RPG players, because they spend a lot of time playing. One of the best lawyers I've ever met in my life is an avid RPG player. We should get him in one of the first edition games. He's fantastic. He's been playing since Redbox.
Sure. And you hit on the crux of it there, Tim. It really is, regardless of what you do, it's an incredible value. And I do want to point out, and I should have had these numbers up. I talk about first edition. It is bonkers and completely the wrong way to do it if you want to play first edition to try and track these books down now. This 45.68, 59.63, and 68.86 adjusted for inflation numbers are nowhere near reality if you go out and try and find these things on eBay or at a local used bookstore and the owner has internet access. The best way to play AD&D, if you want to play first edition AD&D or second edition AD&D for that matter, is go to DriveThruRPG and get the print on demands, because guess what? They are way cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go out now and build a first edition set because you want to play first edition, that book alone is like $300 to $400.
Yeah, which is nuts. The late Jim Ward once told me they printed hundreds of thousands of that. It's not a rare book. It's just got it's just built up a legend around it. But we could do a whole nother video just on that book. But
even that one's $100 to $200 depending on condition. Right?
Depending on the printing and condition. And you always get somebody who'll throw something up on eBay for $500 and say no low ballers. I know what I got.
Yeah, and I see a bunch of people with collections like, oh look, here's my third still shrink wrapped version. I'm like, okay, I don't get it. I want to play it. I want to take the shrink wrap off and open it.
Yeah, that's commodities trading. That's not D&D. Yeah. But lest anyone think that this is a couple of privileged dudes talking about the money we have to spend on RPGs and you should just suck it up. And
no. I've had that so long that it didn't cost that much. You
chart and, from your 5,000 square foot gated community house, order the books, you dummy. All the RPG resources you could ever want are free.
Yeah.
5th edition just got released into Creative Commons. Somebody will create a free 5th edition if they're not already uploading the darn thing somewhere.
Somebody probably had it ready to go 3 weeks ago, right? So
Osric, Swords and Wizardry down on the old school, and there are so many free or inexpensive tabletop RPGs.
For people who don't know, Bill, because you live this stuff, so let's take a second and explain what Creative Commons is, because if you're new to RPGs, you may not understand this, okay? Because it took me a while to figure it out, and I've been playing forever, but I have breaks because of kids and everything. But Creative Commons is an open license that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have carried over. That was legacy from TSR. They talked about canceling it at one point, and the community band together and they changed their minds. What it does is it says old versions are available. You can develop things parallel to them. You can develop a game module for them, and you can sell that using the Dungeons and Dragons logo, monikers, and saying, compatible with. A lot of the older stuff is available for essentially free. You can download PDFs. Sometimes there's a 99-cent fee or a $2.99 Patreon or something. It's not much, but you can essentially get old versions, meaning 1st, 2nd, 3rd. We don't talk about 4th and 5th for essentially nothing, right? And you could get them on your computer. You can print them out. You could just keep them as a PDF. I have the hardbacks because I've had them since I was a kid. I also have the PDFs because I can search them, and I don't have to try to find the indexes, right? So what Creative Commons means is because 6th edition is coming out, or whatever they're calling it, I think it's like 1 D&D or something, whatever.
It's 6th edition, guys. It's going to
6th edition. It's all it is. The rest of it is just marketing. But when that one comes out, 5th edition and everything else is essentially free, right? So you don't have to spend a ton of money to go play. Are you playing the latest edition? Well, no. Are you going to have the snazzy little hardback I have with, the Trampier's painting on the front? Well, no. But you'll have the ability to play. And all of that is exactly the same as what's inside the content of that book, just without the fancy cover, right? So you don't get the nice cardboard cover. You don't get the scribbles I made in there when I was a kid that kind of highlight the parts that are important. But you'll have the ability to play 1st edition through 5th. And there's some fantastic stuff in there. And it, like you said, it's infinite possibilities. And, one of the things my kids showed me was they had a dungeon module they were working on. They were doing a homebrew version. And I think somebody had taken one of his friends had taken like a map I had out of a 5th edition Tomb of Annihilation. Okay, and went and taken pretty decent digital images of it. Instead of having the paper map laid out on the floor, they had the map up on a 65-inch TV.
Nice.
So instead of dealing with the paper map because it took up a lot of the room, they're like, let's just throw it on the TV on the wall, right? So they had the map up there, and they could change to different maps on different. I would have done it just by hanging all the maps in my room as a kid and keeping them up on the wall. But they decided to go the digital route. And I thought it was kind of a genius move on their part because they were kind of cramped for space on what they were doing. So, but those things are available out there. And those things in 5th edition are going to be available really soon because 6th edition is coming right around the corner.
Right.
It's later this year, I think.
I was just going to mention one point regarding the Creative Commons. We don't have the older editions in Creative Commons yet. That's something that Wizards of the Coast has said they were considering. I wish they would stop considering and doing it. But right now we got 5th edition in Creative Commons and the open gaming license, which they tried to terminate last year, is in Creative Commons. But
I put those two things together because OGL kind of got swept in under Creative Commons.
Fair enough.
So, but yeah, it's essentially all those are out there, and they're out there for essentially nothing.
So I was just going to say my point to conclude my points. There's no time like the present. D&D, even if you want to pay for D&D, if you don't want to seek out Osric, Swords and Wizardry, the SRD stuff to do 3rd edition through 5th edition builds of your own. If you don't want to seek that out, if you actually do want to spend money to do this, it's not more expensive. It's the same price as it has been since 1979. And I turn it over to you, Tim, for any of your thoughts.
No, I think that's important. It's if you want the print versions, it's essentially the same price. If you want the digital versions, it's actually less. And you might ask, oh, well, evil Hasbro, why are they going to keep doing this? Well, if I looked up some numbers on the total RPG business market, okay, because Hasbro, which is majority owner of Wizards of the Coast, is a publicly traded company. They care about numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So the overall market for RPGs globally, including Games Workshop, including Wizards of the Coast, including anybody else you can mention, in 2022 was about $1.5 billion. It's not a huge market. Okay, $1.5 billion sounds like a lot. It is a big number to most people, but as far as businesses go, that's not huge. By 2028, it's expected to be $3 billion. That means there's people building into that space, because in 6 years, the amount of dollars, the value of the dollar is not going to be cut in half, right? So that means they're trying to attract new players, and they're successfully doing that. Hopefully the value of the dollar doesn't get doubled. But the point is that that's an 11% growth rate. So that means they want to bring in new people. They want to bring in new customers. They want to bring in people who are interested, the kids my age, the age of my kids, right? So they want to bring in 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, so that they are the players of tomorrow, so that they Bill and Tim 40 years from now, right, that are complaining that 12th edition sucks and, we want 5th edition. But the other thing that's the part of that market that this stuff supports, I've been playing video games since video games were new, right? Pac-Man was the first thing I ever played in arcade. Actually, no, I played Asteroids before that. But some of the earliest video games ever to make the market were the things I actually cut my teeth on, because they were in the bowling alley when my dad was bowling, and he gave me quarters to go shut up. So I don't play as many of the modern video games as my kids do, not because they're not available to me, because we got a Switch, we got Xbox, we got a PS5. They're all over this house. But I bought some of the retro arcade games because that's the stuff I love. I will, however, play the new video games like Baldur's Gate, like the stuff that's based on Dungeons and Dragons. I love those kinds of video games, right? But if I didn't play this, I wouldn't play those. So now let's look at RPGs. If you throw the video game market into it and the virtual tabletop market into it, all of that combined, remember, $1.5 to $3 billion for the desk version, which I think they're going to keep because it motivates people to do the other stuff. If you throw all that other stuff into it, it's $23 billion to $43 billion. 2023 was $23 billion. By 2030, it's projected to be $43 billion if you throw digital into it. So I think all this desktop stuff is going to stay because it motivates people to move into those RPG video games, and it gives them much more of a multimedia approach to it. So I think it's brilliant marketing on their part because it gets people to kind of go all the way around it, and you can kind of control everything from the figures to the video game side, and kind of have people who are like, great, I have the merchandise, I have the books, I have the video game, and people get really excited about all of it. And if you think about the market as it shifts, I've written 7 books, right? So if you look at the market as it shifts, when I started writing books 10 years ago, I sold more print copies than digital. Now I sell 12 or 13 to 1 ebooks versus print. And that's just people's reading habits have shifted to digital. That's what this market is saying, is that, hey, the market is in digital. We want to keep print around. We want to keep that stuff, but it's because it motivates people to go digital. So without the digital side, I think the Hasbro, a company the size of them, would probably throw the print division away and be like, okay, if we don't get digital, who cares? It's too small. They'd just be done with it. And nobody in their right mind in the investment community, which I work a lot with, would look at it and go, hey, the market is 1.5 going to 3, but it's only supported by this video game side. And if nobody's doing the video game side, is that really worth it? Well, probably not, right? So if you don't, I'm not saying everybody has to embrace digital. I'm not saying everybody has to embrace virtual tabletop, but those things are out there for a reason, and they're out there to grow that market. And if those things didn't exist, I don't think the print stuff would survive. So I think virtual and print is really intertwined, kind of like this, and they're going to stay that way. Because without the video games supporting the print stuff in the current market, I don't see it having a future. So I think those are really going to be what kind of holds the print side of it together. At least I hope so.
Well, regardless of what holds it together, Tim, I hope you're right. I hope it stays with us. I hope that Hasbro becomes better stewards and that they put the older stuff directly into the Creative Commons. But until then, guys, keep gaming, have a lot of fun. Tim, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and putting the science in the rant. I appreciate it so much. Everybody, subscribe to Tim Imholt's channel right here on YouTube. I will link to it in the comments below. You should definitely check that out. He and I play a pretty popular first edition AD&D game along with some other great gamers on Tuesday night, which you can check out right here. If you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button and the bell icon for notifications. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Tell us what you liked about it below. If you didn't like this video, give it a thumbs down and tell us what you didn't like about it down below. But regardless of what you do, have a great day and keep rolling the dice. Peace.